Welcome back to Love, Life, and Legacy, the podcast dedicated to helping you navigate these hypersexualized times of ours. And in today's episode, Benji and I are unpacking culture, talking about personal culture, talking about the culture you have in your car, the culture you have in your family, the culture you have at your school or work, and how important it is to build intentional culture. High Noon has been building culture unbeknownst to us. I mean, it was our goal, but we didn't know how, or we didn't really know that we even were to the extent that we are building culture. But lately, we've really noticed that we have a very clear culture here in our staff, in our volunteers, at our events. And it's the result of very intentional decisions that we've made and commitments that we've lived up to the extent that we could, right? We're always a work in progress. And so we want to impart that onto you so that you can figure out, what is your culture as an individual? What culture do you want? If you want to build a channel culture in your life, then you need to know what that looks like. And that's a series of very intentional decisions and intentional living. So Benji and I unpack that for you so that you can do that very effectively. I will see you on the inside. Let's go. Hello, sir and missus. Welcome back to this episode of the podcast with Sir Benjy
Good to see
and
you, guys.
me. We are in the midst of transitioning into summer. It looks like summer. Benji, how's North Carolina in the summer? Is it sticky?
It is just right in terms of stickiness and pleasantness. It's there's like 1 month of brutal heat and humidity, and then the rest of the year is pretty nice. The winters are nice, the fall is nice. But right now it's hot summer.
Yeah, that was the question. I ain't talking about the winter. I'm talking about summer.
Yeah, it's hot now.
Do you have that nice smell in the evenings when it's like the kind of, you smell grass, you smell just summer, all the summer smells?
People cutting grass. Yep. Sound of cicadas, all that. You ever watch those movies,
That's
like
nice.
The summertime movies, and there's just cicadas in the background nonstop? That's kind of what it's like.
Yeah. Those guys are, I never knew what they were until I moved to New Jersey. And then I saw them during that once in a 19-year period when they all hatch and they go crazy, and there's millions of them around. They're ugly. They are not what you would think. It does not look like Jiminy Cricket with a top hat. They look like they are trying to kill you, but they're not. They're just cute. They're singing.
They're too small. Yeah.
Yeah, but if there's a million of them, that's a horror movie right there. Anyway, they're cute. They serve a purpose, I'm sure. I feel like their purpose is to sing and then get eaten by, to eat something that's too big for a little bird to eat. What would eat a cicada?
There's just to be brutal here, there was a international news in America that this year was the year of the cicadas, which means that there is 2 types of cicadas that come out every 19 years or 13 years, something like that. And it only happens every few hundred years where both types of cicadas come out at the same time. And so this year was that year. And so we had around our house, like no joke, hundreds and hundreds of cicada shells and half-eaten cicadas all over our yard, backyard, everywhere. It was actually like a nightmare. And it turns out what eats them is birds and squirrels. They just come around and eat up cicadas. It was a gruesome visual for sure.
Yeah. I feel like, not to get into the vegan debate, but squirrels they're known for eating some nuts. Not everybody. Stay clean here. They that's what they hoard. That's what they store in their little nest for winter. I've never seen them eat, a hamburger. I've never seen a squirrel pulling a hot dog back to its nest. So they're mostly vegetarians, but that's what I remember seeing in New Jersey too. Is like there's just so many of them, they can't resist. They're like, but they're free. So these squirrels just eat them up. It's pretty. They have little mouths, and that would be like, to scale. That's like eating a hamburger the size of a mini basketball. Pretty large. So they're having a field day. Okay. So welcome to the podcast. So the first time we've started with cicadas. We wanted to talk about culture. I really wanted to. So this is something from the very beginning of High Noon that we've been trying to create is culture. That was something that we said repeatedly. We want to influence culture. We want to change culture within our movement, within the world, right? And in terms of our movement, it's, hey, nobody's talking about porn. Nobody's talking about our sexual dysfunction. We want to change that culture to a culture where you do talk about these things, right? And here we are 9+ years later, and people really are. There's free and clear of us. Now there's a culture of much more openness in communities. Even pastors are talking about it more and more. But I realized a lot about like how we create culture, because it was our intention, but it wasn't our focus. We were focusing on the nitty gritty. How do we help people first and foremost? But the byproduct of that was culture. So that's the first thing that I wanted to kind of draw out, is that, in terms of creating culture, it's really important to understand what is culture. Because I just saw, on the internet, somebody's talking about how influential Drake is to culture. It's like Drake is culture. And that's an important point, because I didn't know. I mean, Drake is from where I'm from. And actually I went to school with the guy that makes all of his beats, 40. He was like a year younger than me in my high school. We hung out in the same places, So I was interested to be like, but that's not my music. And then I joined a gym out here. I'm in like downtown Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia, Gold's Gym. So you can imagine me, a walking human toothpick, and a bunch of Mongolian rhinoceroses walking around, like just the biggest beefcakes. And so Drake is just playing on rotate, right? And I'm listening to this because I'd never really listened to his songs. You hear them, but I never listened to the lyrics. But now I have to, because it's at the gym. And it is terrible. He doesn't sing about anything productive whatsoever. And so the idea that he is so influential, and I guess you measure that by numbers, how many people listen to him. He has a huge influence in terms of like the sheer scale of his presence. But his influence is that he, especially on sexuality, the way he talks about women, the way he talks about sex, the way he talks about being a man, this influences so many little data points in people's frame of reference of what's right or wrong, good and bad, because they're just repeating his ideology by singing his songs again and again and again. So in that way, he's absolutely influential to culture. But we are not trying to do that. Benjy did try his hit pop album, his J-pop album that came out called Just Benjy, just hanging with Benjy. I forget the title, is loosely titled. It was a hit. Look for that on iTunes, everybody. Just Poppin', starring Benjy Liama. But that's not our main road. The way that we've been influencing culture is by influencing people, and the people build this culture. Because when you inspire somebody, truly inspire, or you change their life, you help to change their life, they are a changed person in their home, whenever they show up at church, whenever they show up at work or school or whatever. And when you have enough people doing that and change people, they act differently with other people. And you have enough people who are changed hanging out together, and that's culture, right? So the main point that I wanted to say is that culture is largely the result of many people acting a certain way. That's my main observation, is like, when you have a group of people and they're really shy about talking about regarding sex, that means that you have a culture of people who are shy. But when you have a bunch of people who change from being shy to being very open and honest, and they're working on themselves, they're talking about their highs. I had a great week, but I also messed up this week. That's a culture of honesty, because you have a bunch of people doing that, and that's a priority. So now that's your culture. So that's kind of what I wanted to start out with, is like, what is culture? Because know the word. We hear it often, but I don't think we know what it is. But it is the aggregate of many people behaving in a certain way. It's the result. Culture is the result of people's behavior. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Would you say that culture, it is required that there is a group of people that are interacting together with each other in order to create a culture, like a community in some sense?
Well, otherwise, it's a culture of ignoring people because I'm sure there's communities. That's another thing I wanted to get to. There's like individual culture, family culture, community culture. I remember hearing a bunch of years ago, New York City has millions upon millions of people, but their rate of isolation and depression is through the roof. I would say the same is true of Tokyo, Japan, Seoul, Korea, like major cities, because the culture in cities is to be isolated, right? So there's the absence of communication is also a culture, right?
Yeah.
There's a culture in my office space that I rent
I'm
to
just,
work at out here where people don't really look at
Mhm.
each other, talk to each other. And I've fallen into that culture and I hate it because that's not who I want to be. Right. So that's why I started a condition and I'm brainwashing myself to believe I love meeting new people so that I can change my personal culture so that's in conflict with the unhealthy culture that I find myself in. Does that make sense?
yeah. Well, I think there's an unhealthy version of culture, which is isolation. There's also an unhealthy, toxic version of culture, which is a community based on a negative culture, right?
Sure.
So it's
Like what?
connected in that people are having give and take and communicating, but it's based in a culture that is negative or brings people down or is around bringing others down rather than lifting themselves up or lifting other people up, right?
Sure.
And there's also, I think, like on the flip side, there's a heavenly culture that isn't practiced or in community, and it's just done within our own selves. And this is where a lot of people, I think, in our realm are kind of getting stuck. Whereas, like, I have a vision, a value that I cherish, but I'm not practicing it in community. So it's just a culture in me that's not manifested or not substantiated in any way outside of just my own head or an ideal land, right? So it's interesting.
Yeah, then I would say that it's not, within yourself, it's got to be practiced. Otherwise, it's not a culture, it's an idea. Because I think a lot of people have an idea of who they are. Even myself, like I'm a very warm person, but I'm also pretty introverted. So if somebody comes
Mhm.
up to me and they start talking to me, I light up and I start talking, right? But actually, my culture is I'm very standoffish as a person. I've always been, I was thinking about this a lot. What is my
Mhm.
personal culture? What do I bring around with me? And I think a lot of people don't approach me because I'm always so deep in my head. I'm like 10 miles deep in my head in some deep thought that I think is deep. It could be the stupidest thing in the world, but like I'm deep in it. And so my
Mhm.
face is like, do not disturb. It's got a big sign that says, do not disturb because my culture is the result I think that people get from me is that I'm standoffish, but it's not. I'm just really deeply immersed in myself. Like I'm just there
Mhm.
together, present with myself. And so my impression of myself is, oh, I'm a warm person. Actually, though, the substantial culture that I give off is don't talk to me. It's in my face, it's in my body language. It's, when you cross your legs, how you sit on a bench, that's part of your culture. What, like, when you go into a grocery store, if you have headphones on, that's a culture that says, don't talk to me, right?
Mhm.
Looking at people, there's this, it's again, a lot of data points that create a culture. So your personal culture, I guess that's a first
Mhm.
assessment. Like Benji, you're an intense person, and that can be intensely good and can be intensely uh, intense. I don't want to say scary or
Intensely,
anything.
destructively intense.
Yeah,
I just a side note on like this whole conversation. I made a decision recently that every time that somebody does something in traffic that's frustrating, I won't
yeah.
react in a negative way. I will put my hands out the window and make a giant heart with my hands. And if possible, I'll try to smile at them so they can see me smile.
But you probably still have
there's,
angry eyes, so you just look
there's
like you're gonna
no
kill
way
them with a heart.
to upset someone more than if they're angry and all you do is give them a heart and say, I love you. Like you can't beat
Yeah,
someone like that, you know. So I just decided preemptively anytime I get frustrated, or not me frustrated, but somebody's like for whatever reason like upset because people just drive. They're just upset for no reason. I just put my hands out the window with a heart like this. It's the funnest thing ever.
Guys, he's got a car that has automatic drive, so it's okay, please,
That's
because
true.
your first thought might be like, which hand is on the steering wheel if both hands are in a
Yeah.
heart?
Well,
So
the idea is like that's the culture that I am creating for my life, and I've just decided. I mean, this was recently. I've only done a few, maybe 2 times, right? And it was just like a cultural decision. Like I can think that I want to be the guy that can react to negative situations like that, or I can just do it
yeah,
out of
yeah,
habit because I've decided already that that's the person I am. Another example is I've decided that this was years ago. I decided anytime I see somebody that needs help on the side of the street while I'm driving, I will always stop and help them because then I don't have to think about like, do I stop? Do I not stop? Is someone going to help? I just already decided like if I see someone who's, crossing the street where they shouldn't be or handicapped or in a wheelchair or someone's blind, that happened a few months ago. I've decided like I'm going to stop and I'm going to help them no matter what. Right.
yeah.
So that's like, to me, a practicing of a personal culture. And it just helps to decide like that's just the person I'm going to be, whether I feel like it or not. I don't know if that's what you mean by like personal
That's
culture. That's kind
absolutely
of how I'm. Yeah.
no. So that's the thing, is that the vast majority of us have a culture that we've fallen into, and it's not who we want to be. That's the
Mm-hmm.
high noon world, is like people entering through the front door, and we try to make the front door as big and welcoming as possible to be like, hey, we welcome all types. But then when you come in to the high noon house, it's to start building yourself into the person that you want to be. That starts with culture. Think about it. You have a culture with your phone. You have a certain hand that you hold your phone with, a certain way that you look at it, certain time that you look at it, certain emotions that draw you towards your phone. You have a feeling about your phone. You have a culture with your room. You have a culture in your house or apartment. In your car is such a great example, because it's such a weird phenomenon that you have a bunch of people who are completely alone, but they're traveling with this little world. So they feel like they're kind of like isolated, and they have their own kingdom, and so don't get in their way, because it's just a bunch of individuals. I always imagine in traffic that people are just floating in the same way. They don't have cars, they're just sitting though in the same position. And we would treat each other very differently if we were like that close to each other. Like when you're waiting in line at a grocery store or something, very different than waiting in traffic in a car. You don't scream at yourself or like scream obscenities like you might in your car while you're just waiting in line, because if you do that, you're kind of a crazy person, right? So
Mm-hmm.
uh everywhere we go we have culture, but for the most part it's very unintentional and it's very reactive. And like you're saying, how important it is to decide who you want to be. That's the act of the North Star goal. This is who I want to be. That's what I'm saying with like, I'm brainwashing myself. I just started a new condition yesterday here. And one of the main points is I love meeting new people. And I wake up early and I repeat this to myself until I feel it, so that I walk down the street and one thing that I noticed is that I don't hold eye contact anymore with people. I might make eye contact for a second and then I'll look away because I don't want to engage, because I don't understand. Like, I'm in a foreign land. I've had so many awkward conversations because people want me to speak Mongolian and I can't. And, their English is limited. So it just turned out to be frustrating. So now I just ignore them altogether. I got to change that. I don't like that culture. I want to give every single person the warmth and the love of God. Why not? Right? But that's just something that I have to change moment by moment, person by person. And yesterday was my first full day of doing this. And I could tell I was at like a 70% success rate.
Hey, just a quick interruption to tell you about the 40-day High Noon Challenge. If you're trying to find a way to start living a high noon life today with no shadows and create a radiant blessing, then this simple challenge is for you. We will send you daily lessons from our team that will keep you motivated on your journey. It's totally free, guys, and you'll get constant content directly to you. Just sign up today at highnoon.org/challenge. That is highnoon.org/challenge. All right, back to the show.
I could, and I still didn't. I want to say senbeno because that's how you say hi, but I only did it some of the time. I didn't do it all the time, and sometimes I chickened out. You know, if the person looks scary, I go to Gold's Gym with a bunch of rhinoceroses. I don't just say hi, fellas, but I should. Why not? Why not be that dorky guy that's like, hey, fellas, so what are we lifting today, huh? Or something ridiculous, just to like melt the tension and be a weirdo. Why not? That's who I am, right? So, but the cultural aspect in terms of the individual is like, what kind of culture do you even have in your own body? How do you treat yourself? How do you eat? How do you think? What do you do when you're uncomfortable? We want you to build a culture where you are incredibly not only comfortable in your own skin, but that you genuinely love being yourself. That is somebody who's not going to do something stupid with their time and energy. Somebody who has on the very base level a very healthy individual culture. Okay, and that, how do you build that? That's intentional. Looking at where your culture is gross with yourself. What aspects of your life are you not comfortable that you have like a lot of people have a gross culture in their bedrooms, right? They're just like they lose energy. They don't like how they feel in their bedroom. They waste time scrolling.
It's the
Change that.
land of escapism for a lot of people. It's where they go to escape.
Yeah. So then you have a culture of escaping. You don't want that.
Yeah. I love how we are reinventing ourselves, Andrew, with North Star stuff. We're practicing what we preach. I made a new North Star for myself 2 days ago as well. So
nice.
Trying to practice that stuff all the time, right? It was actually back to driving because apparently we do a lot of that here in America. Not in Mongolia, I know, but here in America. I was driving with my kids from my parents' house, and it was during rush hour. It takes about 30 minutes to get to my house from their house. And it took about an hour of driving. And I started to get agitated. I was like, why is this taking so long? We had to go different back roads and different highways. And then I was like slowly but surely getting more and more agitated. And then Ira, my daughter, she's 7. She says, Papa, are you being grateful right now, or are you being entitled? Like that, right? And I was like, okay, I'm being entitled, right? And basically, I asked her to do this to me if I was ever getting frustrated, because it just melts me immediately and melts away all the just frustration, right? Having a little girl asking that. And I realized that there's a lot to be grateful for in those situations. Like, number one, I could be doing this commute every day of my life, and I'm not. It's one time, you know? A lot of people do this commute every day and in traffic for hours and hours in lots of places, right? I'm here in the car with my kids, and we're listening to songs together and singing songs together. That's pretty cool, right? And in this beautiful state of North Carolina. So after that conversation, I was like, I want to be in a state of gratitude as much as possible. I would say all the time, but be in a place where no matter what, if you can be grateful, then there's nothing that is unpleasant. If you think about it like that, like everything is surmountable and every situation is amazing. If as soon as you add in the element of gratitude and reduce the entitlement, which is basically like the feeling of, I deserve more, or this isn't good enough, or I don't have enough, or this is not okay. Like that kind of entitlement is like, if it's cranked up too high, then gratitude throws out the window. And then we can't experience God. Like we can't experience God. We can't experience love. We can't experience any of that. But I feel like when I just change the perspective to like, at least I don't have to do this every day, this commute, at least I get to, do this commute together with my kids and enjoy the time together. Then as soon as I do that, then it's like, oh, this is a great situation. And that's how I feel like I can actually feel God more, because then it's like the impetus of God is gratitude, I believe, because gratitude allows you to see how amazing life is. And without seeing how amazing life is, it's very hard. It's significantly harder to experience any receiving love, because if we're not in a state of gratitude, it's all like entitlement, which is I don't have enough. And when we're in that state, it's just that much harder to feel love. So that's my North Star, is I want to just be someone that feels gratitude. And it's like, I could just say, oh, I just want to be gratitude. What can I do to be more grateful? And what I realize is when it counts, like when I'm in traffic, when life just sucks, just to decide to be grateful. And it's simple as just a perspective change on the situation itself, right?
Yeah.
So that's me. My notes are.
Yeah. I love it. Because when something is part of the culture, then it just feels natural, right? So if you have a healthy culture, then within yourself, then gratitude is the natural result. If you have an unhealthy culture, then complaining, entitlement, these things are the result. So yeah, one step out of that is to understand, according to principle. I remember this concept coming from lectures about principle that I really liked, is about like how we're influenced and how we can influence the world around us. We are part of a collective, like the whole human body, but we're also individual truth bodies, right? And so when we're a part of a culture, you have many different aspects of culture, right? So if you're a student, then your school has a culture, but then even your class has a culture, which is like a subculture of the main culture. If you are a part of an unhealthy culture, you have to be extremely strong to be able to influence the culture around you. It's far more likely that the culture around you is going to influence you, unless you're incredibly resolute and clear in your mind who you want to be, and you're unrelenting in your execution of that day in, day out. And that means that every day you're swimming upstream, you're going against the grain. And you can tell that religious people in this world, people who believe in not just God, but are a part of a faith, are very much in this camp right now. That, to be proud about God, to be proud of a religion, and a minority religion like us, is extremely hard. It's so much easier to get enveloped by the culture of negativity around us, to be honest, to be quite honest. And it requires a clear intention and a support system in order to stay resolute. And I've seen so many people switch who they are and their identity based on a negative culture influencing them more and just wearing them down. It's just grading them every day, just so much negativity. And they say, fine, I'm just going to be like you because I cannot resist this negative culture anymore. I'm just going to become it. And so they become jaded, they become critical and all this stuff. And in terms of the blessing and in terms of sexuality, this is porn. It's unrelenting in its desire, knocking on your door, knocking on your window, hey. And it's constantly trying to take you away from the culture of heaven, the heavenly culture of like loving yourself and loving people unconditionally and unwaveringly. This is the state where we're most powerful. It's where we belong. It's where we feel like we're at home.
Yeah.
But there's so many things pinging at us every single day, trying to like derail us from that person. And porn is one of the greatest ones because it's always there and it's screaming. And there's so many friends that it's enlisted all these little friends. So it was just a political season. Like they just had the parliamentary elections here last week, and they're really good about democracy in that, in Mongolia, in that there's 26 parties. Instead of just in America, now there's like 2, basically, that anybody can vote for. Out here, there's 26. And every party had their little camp of people with flags walking around. Like, it was very cute because it was kind of like tribal. Anyway, but imagine all of the distractions having these people with flags trying to distract you from the person that you want to be, from your Chanuguk self. That's what it is to be walking down the street and you see this, ad that's hypersexualized. That's campaigning for you to, become a part of that culture. Hey, join us, right? Join the misery. Eat this terrible food, watch this terrible stuff, listen to this terrible music. It's all apostolizing, it's evangelizing for you to join that culture. And it's not like, there's definitely the old taste of Christianity, which is like, that's the devil. Look at the devil trying to tempt you. And you could say that, I'm sure. I don't think that's very productive, though. I think it's because then you're just defensive and reactive. A much better way is like, yeah, there's always going to be temptation, even from ignorant people who have good intentions in their heart, but they're from a broken culture. if you want to be clear, you have to know what is healthy culture, and you have to build it brick by brick within yourself based on looking at what is heavenly culture in other people, based on good interactions that make you feel good. I want more of that culture. Like friends. Do you want a culture amongst your friends where you guys just gossip about each other? Where you guys just talk smack? The second you leave your group of friends, you know that they're going to talk smack about you. Oh, that guy sucks. How terrible is that? Right? You want a culture of people that anytime you're not around, they're like, I miss that guy. That guy's so great. Or whatever. That's such an amazing heavenly culture. It's the same thing. They're both talking about you, but one is a healthy culture where they're talking lovingly. The other one is trying to bring you down because they're dying internally. That's that culture.
Yeah, I think a prime example is media use, particularly social media, but I also include YouTube in there because YouTube is a sneaky form of media that people don't call social media, but it very much has the same elements of social media, and the fact that it's designed to, algorithmically designed to keep you addicted, right? I used to have the frame of thinking of like all media is wrong and evil and negative and bad and satanic, right?
Yes, you did.
You could say a huge percentage of it is, but then I realized that I think a really indicative way to see someone's personal culture is go through their news feed or social media feed or YouTube feed to see what comes up, right?
Yeah.
Because the algorithm is only a robot. It's only AI that's trying to feed what we think is interesting. That's it. And so until I saw my wife's feed, like on YouTube, I thought everything was evil. Because as soon as I saw her feed, it was just like how to cook meals, and that's it. Like it's all just food stuff because that's what she's thinking about and that's what she's interested in. And it's nothing impure or toxic at all, So I think where we spend our time and attention online is a huge indicator for where our personal culture is,
Yeah.
I honestly, like, I guess I'm at a place where I don't even trust myself. Like I won't even touch that stuff because I just don't trust it. I have the same relationship with popcorn. Like if you go to the movie theater,
Yeah.
of course I want to eat popcorn, but I don't even touch it because I know I'm just going to eat half of the box and then get a refill, right? So that's like how I assume it. I relate to it. It's probably not the healthiest perspective, but for me, at least it's healthier than the alternative, which is just to indulge in everything that I find interesting, eat all the popcorn. So personally, I'm trying to find that balance. Like, what is the heavenly part of media consumption and use and the internet in general, and what is just toxic and we should just ignore as much as possible,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. A lot of these are generalities and abstractions. To be specific, when we started gaining real traction in terms of changing the culture in High Noon, a landmark in this process was the 5 virtues, right? Is okay, let's just stick our flag in the ground here and let's just say we're going to fight with all of our might to inculcate, to embody, to become these 5 virtues as a priority as individuals on our team, right? And our staff. First and foremost, it starts with us. And then together with all of our facilitators and all of our participants, that this becomes the priority so that the actions are in line with certain clear types of, values, virtues. And the result was the culture that emanates from people who live like that, who prioritize that. Because guess what? In this culture, if we're saying that grace is a big thing, then you're allowed to make mistakes. That's a part of our culture. I definitely know families and I definitely know communities, even in a movement, where if somebody makes a mistake, there is no tolerance. You are out. It's very close-hearted and very kind of Old Testament-ish, right?
Yep.
There's no grace. We believe in grace. We also don't believe that, if somebody's just perpetually lying, then that's not grace. That's just being reckless because they're not embodying honesty. You have to be honest in order to receive grace yourself. So these virtues, honestly, we didn't know. We didn't know the result. We didn't know what it was going to turn into. We just knew that these virtues are really important and we need to start talking about them and start living them and planting them in terms of our content and all that. And the result has been That is the high noon culture, is people who are living the 5 high noon virtues. And that's power. That's really, really powerful, because now you have a place where you can go where a bunch of people are living in a certain way, and the result is that they're much healthier and supportive because they know the game. This is the game that we're playing. We're playing the game of becoming the 5 high noon virtues together. We're lifting each other up. So that's really, I mean, the formula that I nerded out on seems so simple, but it's the byproduct of almost a decade of very intentional building, right? Which is North Star goal plus practicing the 5 high noon virtues in community creates high noon culture, or what you and I have both been saying, Chanuguk culture, right? That is Chanuguk culture, because you put somebody there who's suffering, and guess what? Steep them in the water of high noon culture, and they will start to become their Chanuguk selves, right? Oh, I hate myself. Okay, well, let's unpack that. Let's get honest about what that is. Let's allow grace in there. Let's be accountable. Okay, you hate yourself today. Is there any way that you can hate yourself a little bit less and love yourself a little bit more? Now you got accountability, right? Oh, you say that you want to love yourself. What did you do today to do that? That's integrity. So like, you put anybody, let's say you have a circle of people who have been practicing high noon culture. Let's say there's 100 of them. And then you put one person in there in the middle of that circle who's suffering their brains out. Give them a while, and they will turn into a high noon person. That's the inevitable conclusion, right? They will become the culture that surrounds them. And that's what we want. We have a small, I don't want to say army, but we have a small cadre of people from around the world, small relative to the size of the world. But it's already influenced our church, for sure, worldwide. And there's definitely some resistance, because our church is a living, breathing entity, and it sometimes rejects high noon culture. But high noon culture is so true and persistent that it will take over our movement, and it will take over the world, because it's true. And I don't mean high noon as in Andrew and Benji and Uncle Dave and Mitsue, and no, high noon culture as in the 5 high noon virtues together in community with a North Star goal.
Yeah, and also it affects people's lineage, because we're thinking generationally. Uncle Dave is thinking hundreds of years down the road, not the next 10 years or 7 years or whatever time frame we're working with. So lineage wise, just imagine the amount of blessings that have been created and saved and improved, right? Just our own, marriages in themselves as well. So it's massive. The ripple effects is huge. I did want to touch on one point about high noon culture that I know a lot of people are trying to figure out, like, I was talking with a brother recently. He was in GPA, and we're having a really deep talk, and he's been going through this kind of like phase of not like feeling like he's not making progress, which is so common in the high noon world. Just like, oh, I'm still at square one. I'm still exactly where I was 3 months ago or whatever. I'm not changing. I'm not progressing. And then I asked him to look back a little further and say, like, okay, a year ago, do you feel like you've grown? He was like, oh yeah, completely. Like, I'm totally different in terms of my sexual integrity and my practicing the 5 virtues and all this, my community. I'm like, isn't that the point? Because we have delusioned ourselves to think that high noon culture, living a high noon life, is some kind of line you cross, some finish line, and then suddenly your life is perfect or something like that, right? It's crazy to say, but this is how we think. I think biologically we're just ingrained to think in binary, which is I'm either good or bad. I either have a bad day or a good day. I'm either succeeding or I'm failing, right? But I told his brother that it's not about quitting porn for good, which is a lot of people's goal, which is not the right goal to have in the first place. But I said, focus on the healing and recovery part, and then make that the goal. And then the desire to act out will decrease naturally, because you just won't need to or want to anymore. And then he had a really good question, which is, what does healing look like? Right? And I was like, that's a great question. So I asked a bunch of people. I talked to Gene Honeycutt. He's
I
kind
thought
of
you were going to say I asked ChatGPT.
No, man. I actually didn't ask ChatGPT. I asked a human being named Gene Honeycutt, who is kind of our resident recovery coach guy. That's his whole work right now. And we had a really good conversation. And our conclusion was that it's a lot of people will track sobriety. Some people will track amount of tears that are being shed to indicate that someone's healing, right? But we concluded that if you have more positivity in your life and less negativity. Another way of saying that is more positive thoughts and feelings toward yourself and towards others, and less negativity towards yourself and towards others, right? As a general kind of overarching metric to track. And not just that, are you able to string together more and more days that are positive, that are in line with your North Star and who you want to be and your vision and your values and your culture, and less days that are just low energy and just misaligned with your North Star. And so it's not about, like, me and Andrew, speaking for myself, it's not that I have great days all the time and therefore I'm a high noon person. I just have less and less crappy days. I have less and less times where I just feel like I'm a terrible person, terrible father. It used to be like once a week, I would just wake up and be like, I'm a terrible dad. And I don't even know where this feeling comes from. I just wake up with that feeling. And now it's maybe every 2 months or something, And that's the point. It's like, it's not perfection. It's recognizing that I have come so far in just 1 year, 2 years, to the point where I can look back and say, I've grown so much. So there must be something I'm doing right. There must be something that's going in the correct direction. And I'm going to celebrate that, not to pat myself on the back, but just so I have evidence that I'm going in a good direction. And I should have confidence that the process works. So the practicing 5 virtues in high noon, if people join our programs and see their progress from just month to month and year to year, even just within a few months, even within just one program, people will say, like, yeah, I've totally grown in the last quarter. There you go. And it's just about having, in other words, more light and less shadows at the end of the day. If you have more light and less shadows and you string more of those days together, that is progress and that's growing. And that's the point,
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's really important to understand too, that there's always going to be dark days. And because even if you've got it figured out and you have a really good rhythm, well, then that means that you're going to likely want to help other people. And guess what? Now you're inheriting some of their darkness, and then watching somebody else suffer, or wanting to help somebody but not knowing how, causes you to be darkness if you're an empathetic person, right? So now you're going outward and you're inheriting other people's shadows in a sense, and you're helping to bring them light. But when you do that, you also inherit some of their darkness. And then culturally too, again, it kind of refracts out to, if you get to the point where you can help other people, now you're helping groups of other people. Well, now you're dealing with a whole bunch of stuff, and then societally, you take on more responsibility in your job or whatever. You're now responsible for more and more people. There's always going to be difficult days, right? And so the way I see it is like, we are meant to be vessels for Heavenly Parents' love, right? If you can imagine a tube, and God's love is supposed to come in through the top and flow out through the bottom. So come in through our heads and leave through our hearts and through our bodies, right? When we dwell on negativity, when we don't kind of live productive lives, then we become a block. And all of that stuff that Heavenly Parents trying to give to us gets clogged. It doesn't pass through us. It's still there, but we're blocking it, right? So it's a matter of clearing that out. And to be honest, sometimes life just throws so much at you and you cannot process it all. And so you feel clogged. That feeling of being clogged is very much akin to just like, spiritual constipation. It's like, I just feel super overwhelmed, uncomfortable. I feel just really not at ease right now. And that can feel anxiety is a byproduct of that, or anger, frustration, and because things are not flowing. These are good days. These are growth days. Life is throwing a lot at you. It's just organizing it so that you can get back to flowing again. Get back to flowing. And when things are flowing, doesn't mean that you're not angry. It's just really easy to get back to a flow state and not dwell on anger. These other emotions are not negative, but they're like sparks that say, hey, I'm here. And you're like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. Give it a high five, and then it moves on. But when we're in a bad state, anger comes and is like, I want to hang out. And you're like, yeah, let's talk, buddy. And then anger just like sets up camp in your house. And then it's like, I'm going to stay a while. And you're like, yeah, that's fine. And so then you become buddy with these negative emotions. But no, you got to keep on clear flow. I got stuff to do. Nice to see you, anger. I love you. Give you a hug. Thanks. You've helped me a lot in my life, but I got to go. And then it moves on. You keep moving. Flow. So that flow is really where you want to be, because life is working quickly and we don't see that when we're stuck somewhere. Life is still happening. We just don't see it because we're stuck in time. We're glitching. Yeah. So yeah, please note that, like Benji's saying, we do use the visualization of like light and dark, and the high noon is to radiate. And to be honest, you do radiate most of the time, but that doesn't mean that you don't have some darkness pop up, because we're also dealing with ancestral stuff. I just heard, this guy talking about epigenetics and how you inherit 15 to 20 generations of feelings that are not your own when you're born. And you're dealing with your ancestral stuff, in a real time. Sometimes you have emotions. You're like, where is this emotion coming from? Very random. So it bubbles up. But you deal with it well when you have a healthy culture. You dwell on it and you let it take over your life when you have an unhealthy culture of just trying to deal with it yourself, pretend it's not there, whatever.
Yeah. We had a high noon culture moment today in our core program. So core program is a singles program for people that want to prepare well for marriage and relationship. And we have about 80 people, in that program right now. And there's this ongoing group chat that's very vibrant, very live. There's like 30 messages every day that I have to read through, or I want to read through, from people just commenting in this group chat, right, in WhatsApp. And then I was reading through them today, and they're just so very positive and supportive, and people sharing their experiences. And then people naturally want to share a lot of their frustrations that negativity they're having towards the opposite gender, right? And it's nice because we have both genders, and so women are sharing their grievances about men, and men about women, and then they're kind of like supporting, but also having a healthy debate about certain points, and it's quite beautiful, right? And then I feel like I have to chime in when it's getting too much like negativity and blaming and lacking of taking personal responsibility or seeing things from a healthier perspective, right? And so I was seeing a lot of people frustrated at the opposite gender, or women basically frustrated at men, to put it bluntly. And it kept coming up. And then the men were saying like, yeah, I totally agree with you. Men are so heartless and emotionless and all this stuff, right? And I don't comment often, but I had to bring it up. And I was like, guys, I'm seeing a lot of blaming going on. And so I kind of explained the purpose of this program is to let out the emotions, but also to ultimately take responsibility for them and to grow. That's the point. The point of this entire program is to grow. And if we're blaming and pointing fingers, it's okay and it's fine, but it's also indicative that there's a great opportunity for growth here. If there's any time we're pointing fingers or frustrated at people or an individual or group of people, there's a massive opportunity for growth. And so I pointed this out in the group and I said, hey guys, like push the brakes a little bit. It's okay if you guys want to share this stuff, but please balance that with a healthy perspective on men and see how men and women both are uniquely beautiful in their own divine way, right? And so I made that post. A lot of people, commented and saying, yeah, thank you. I wanted to say the same thing. I was feeling this, whatever. And then I felt a need to explain why I made that post, right? Kind of explaining, because I want people to share honestly. That's the point. Like you're saying, we want people to not squash those emotions or ignore them, but to like high five them and acknowledge them, but also to learn from them in the end. And so I said, guys, I'm not saying this because it's wrong to have these frustrations. Not at all. I'm saying that this is a place where you should let them out. But at the end of the day, the purpose of why we're here is to grow personally so that we can be marriageable people, right? Or you guys, not me, can be marriageable people. And so I have to point this out because that's the high noon way of practicing honesty. Honesty is not just saying what you think, but it's being truthful with ourselves. It's saying what I think, but taking responsibility for those emotions and then ultimately saying, why do I feel this way? And how can I grow through this? And so I was pointing out that kind of inconsistency that I was seeing in the group that no one was really acknowledging, is that it's okay to have frustrations, but are you going to counterbalance that with personal responsibility and trying to see men in a healthy way and women in a healthy way as God sees them? right? So that was fresh off of the press just today in our groups, and that's what we're practicing like all the time in core, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. To have a healthy culture means that difficult things can pop up and should pop up. You just deal with them in a healthy way.
That's what she
That's
said.
what a community, that's what a that's what a religious community is really does at its best. When it's strongest is it goes towards problems and it says, "Hey, this person's really struggling. This marriage is really struggling. This family is really struggling. Let's go help them." Not by just giving them gifts, but letting them have it out together in community. And I remember the Ukrainian community was so good at that.
Mm.
They outlined their process, and basically they have these circles where couples together, there's like, imagine 30 people in a room, 15 couples sitting together in a room, and they air out their grievances about each other. Like the husband says, "My wife is always in front of all the other couples," right? And then usually it's resolved within the couple because they realize how stupid they sound in front of other people. But then also, if there's a couple that's very insistent that, "No, you're wrong, no, you're wrong," then they collectively say, "Well, here's what I see in this situation. Like, you're being selfish, you're being this, you're being that." And they help them kind of see objectively their own situation by getting a lot of very uncomfortable feedback. But to me, like, that's the that's the very intense, heat turned up all the way, high noon version of like a couple having a checkup in terms of your community. But how cool is that? Because if struggles are known, then the community can help lift the weight of those struggles. So many couples deal with the weight of the world by themselves, and of course breaks apart the couple, because no couple's meant to take all of their problems, all of their burdens by themselves. You're supposed to have a team of people that help you with that. So that's the high noon way. If you're single, if you're in a couple, if you're a family, find out what your culture is within your family. Because even if you're single, you have a family. How's your culture in your family? What works? What doesn't work? And what can you contribute to a culture being healthier? Your family, yourself, your local community. I hear so many people, "My church is like this." Why don't you do something about it, right? That's what I do. I mean, in Colorado, my wife and I when we lived there, we were at the church 6 days a week, just doing something to try to make it, to pitch into the pot, to make it something that we could love and be proud of, right? So yeah, culture is very much a reflection of where people are at. And if you're a part of an unhealthy culture, then you need to influence it to be healthy, or you need to remove yourself from that culture and go to something that's healthier. But I really suggest that, you focus on that 500 virtues, and that be the measure of your health, the health of your culture. Am I doing this as an individual? That's how healthy you are as an individual culture. Is my family living like this? That's the standard for like a family. Are they living the 500 virtues? Is my church community? Is my school? Whatever. And the extent to which they are embodying those 500 virtues is the extent to which they are healthy or not. All right. I think we've exhausted this point, but just please, it's a very healthy point to constantly, like Benji and I are doing proactively, we're always evaluating our own personal culture, our family culture. I really feel it when our family's culture is kind of veering off. I get very uncomfortable because I'm like, dude, this is my family, the one that I created. I better step up and help to bring us back. So we'll have a family meeting and be like, "Guys, I noticed some unhealthy behavior. Let's get back on track." And so we are always able to course correct. So please assess your personal culture, your car culture, your bedroom culture, and then also one step further, your family culture. And if you have a church community, your church community culture, and see how you can contribute to course correcting it. Okay. That's a great action step. And especially, I mean, we're all about sexuality. So look at your culture with sexuality. What's working, what's not, where you need to work on your phone, where you need to work on talking more, that's the purpose of the 500 virtues.
Yeah, I think course correcting is always wise. There's something my brother told me when we first had our kids. I was really deliberating between homeschooling or other schooling. And I was really going back and forth and being in state of inaction. And then I was like having all these fears and projecting my fears into the future. Like, what if we homeschool and this happens, when they're 10 or whatever? And Sammy looked at me and was like, well, then you can just course correct, right? And then that conversation for some reason stuck with me for many years. And I always think about that when making decisions. It's like most of the decisions, not all, but most decisions we make in life can be course correct. Even marriage itself, actually, if you think about it, it's not course correcting as in leaving the spouse and finding someone else. That's not what I mean. What I mean is we can course correct ourselves in the relationship. Like we can course correct the way that we relate to my wife or spouse or with my kids or with whoever based on a really big decision of who do you marry. And so it makes making decisions less weighted and less like this is going to eternally, I mean, it is a big decision, but that's an extreme example. But most decisions in life, even the most extreme ones, to some extent can be directed, slightly to a different degree to get to the destination, to the end goal. But if we're stuck in paralysis analysis where we don't even make a decision because we're fearful of a possible outcome that is, irreversible, which is probably never going to happen. But just having the mentality of like, you try, you iterate, reiterate, and then you course correct, and then you land in the place, right?
Yeah. I like it. Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, that's the grace part again, where nobody is irredeemable. All right, everybody. Yeah. I think that does it for today. We don't want to beat this any further. So please do what you got to do and reach out to us if you need anything. We're always here for you.
Hey, did you know that our team wants to do more events? Well, if you want to bring the High Noon message to your community or group, then let us know and we'll try to work something out. There's a simple application that you can fill out right now at highnoon.org/invite. And one of our team members will get back to you to see what's possible. That's highnoon.org/invite. All right, see you in the next episode.